guys, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my booktube channel. So as I've grown increasingly popular on Wattpad, I keep on coming up on the same question, which is what writing tips do you have? So today I'm going to address a few of the writing tips I've previously given, but all together, and some extra tips that I've thought of since. So first of all, we're going to start off with general writing tips. My first piece of general writing advice is the 10,000 hours rule. So according to Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, it takes 10,000 hours to become good at something. And he's come to this conclusion by studying pretty much everyone from top athletes to violinists. But what does 10,000 hours mean for you? Really, this is just my way of saying that you should read a lot and write a lot. Because the only way you're going to become a better writer is through experience. So if possible, try to make reading and especially writing a routine. Like start out with just an hour a day if you're not doing that, and work your way up from there. Number 2 is write what you love. So this tip is pretty basic, but essentially take the genres you love and what you specifically love out of those genres. Like if you love love triangles, then go ahead and use those. If you love assassins, like me, then you should use those. But just take various aspects of stories that you like and put it in your own book. I always like this quote by Pablo Picasso that says, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." And no, I'm not recommending you plagiarize someone else's work. But don't be afraid to take the things you love from other people's stories, whether it's the scenes or the characters or whatever, and certainly don't type them out word for word or anything, but take aspects of what you love about those scenes and characters and put it in your own story. Not only will it be more fun to write, but your readers are going to sense that you actually enjoy what you're doing, and they're going to enjoy the story more as well. Then finally, my third general writing tip is to attend a writer's conference. So maybe you're just writing as a hobby and your main goal is to become popular on Wattpad. That's fine. But if you're interested in writing as a career, you definitely have to go to writing conferences, or even if you just want to improve your writing craft. At conferences, you have the opportunity to meet editors and cover designers and website designers, literary agents, and publishers, and a lot of best-selling authors and industry professionals. So if you want to be traditionally published, you should probably go there to try and find a literary agent. I've done some research, and it's kind of weird, because a lot of publishers now don't accept unsolicited manuscripts. In short, they want you to be represented by a literary agent. But the funny thing about that is that a lot of literary agents don't accept unsolicited manuscripts either. So I've heard that primarily the two ways that literary agents gain clients are: 1, if a certain writer has been recommended by one of their current author clients, or 2, if they meet them at a writer's conference. So maybe you have a lot of author friends, maybe you don't. If you don't, you need to go to a writer's conference. Otherwise, you're just blindly sending out these subscriptions, and here's the thing, pretty much everyone does that, but few people take the time and put in the effort and resources to go to an actual writer's conference. They're pretty expensive, but if you want to improve your writing craft and to get published, you should definitely consider going. Now let's delve into some of the writing specifics that you'll need for your story. We'll address plot, character, and writing itself. So first of all, let's start with plot. And while I'm not great at plot and I have so much more I need to improve on, I do have a few tips. So the first one is base it off of the character arc. I once made the mistake of taking K.M. Wineland's book on structuring your story and basing the plot on that. And while the story structure is good to know and good to have in mind, ultimately the plot is about the character arc. So start with the character arc and work out from there. And I'll explain more about the character arc in the characters section of this video. Next, make it realistic. So in writing, there's something called the suspension of disbelief. So essentially this means that all books have to be unbelievable to a certain degree because they are, after all, fiction. But there's a certain point where your story becomes too unbelievable and it snaps your reader's suspension of disbelief and it just makes the whole thing seem unreal and they can't get into the story. So obviously that's to be avoided. And as I've gone through Wattpad, I find that one of the mistakes a lot of beginning writers make is that it's just not realistic. Like the characters do and say things that the writer themselves would probably never do in real life. And there are just so many coincidences in the plot and things just don't quite seem real and it's hard to immerse yourself in that kind of story. And maybe you have a reason for making it seem kind of unrealistic. Maybe you need to get a character from plot point A to plot point B so that they solve this huge mystery. Or maybe your character is stuck in a situation and you need to get them back out of it. But here's the thing, readers can really sense when the author's kind of behind the scenes manipulating the plot. And this might kind of sound weird because of course authors manipulate the plot. They make the plot. But as you write, you'll gradually learn that there's kind of a difference between forcing a character or plot to do something and kind of just letting it naturally occur. And part of this is making the character and plot behave as realistically as possible, even if it's fiction. Next is outlining. So I kind of outline and plan my story differently based on whether or not it's going on Wattpad or whether it's something I intend to publish myself. So on Wattpad, what I do is before I start a story, I of course have the basic structure of the story in mind. Like I kind of know what's happening and where I want it to go, but often that's subject to a lot of change. So I use this program called Scrivener, and I'll kind of have these note cards where I put certain plot points that I know will happen eventually. I don't know if I'll change my mind later. I don't know in what order they'll always happen, but I put them up there. So I have this really vague outline for the whole thing, but really it's just kind of to help me to get started writing and to give me a general direction to go. Like, I remember when I started The King's Cursed Bride, my current Wattpad book, and I actually only figured out exactly how the story would end a month or two ago, but that's still subject to change, and I haven't figured out a lot of what's supposed to happen between where the story currently is and where it's supposed to be at the end. Now, if I'm plotting a story that I actually want to publish, I do it pretty differently. I have a much more detailed outline based on the character arc structure I told you about earlier. And if you want to learn more about story structure and character, I would recommend Plot vs. Character by Jeff Gerke. It gives you a basic outline, but it's not so structured and confining that it feels like you're restricted and kind of makes the story feel unnatural. Maybe there are some people who can plot their stories down to like the teeny-weeny details, but I still figure out a lot as I go along, even if I plot thoroughly. And then finally, cliffhangers!
Cliffhanger, hanging from a cliff. That's why he's called Cliffhanger.
So if you've read my stories on Wattpad, you know that I'm big on cliffhangers. And though my readers will say that they hate them and it's like, oh, this is killing me, according to the number of views I get when I use cliffhangers, they actually love them. So what I've noticed is when there's kind of an area of the story where the pace is a bit slower and the cliffhangers I leave at the end of the chapter aren't necessarily as steep or sharp as some of the other cliffhangers I've used, my readership kind of drops a bit and my viewers go down. So if you use cliffhangers, readers will say they hate them, but cliffhangers will help the reader to love the story and to be addicted to it and to keep on reading. And even if you're not posting on Wattpad, you do not want your reader to permanently drop the book. In fact, you want them to drop the book as little as possible. So at every point where the reader could have an opportunity to put the book down, like at a chapter break, you should probably consider using a cliffhanger or using some other plot device to make sure the tension and suspense are really high. Then finally, character. So first of all, we're going to talk about the character arc. Character arc, essentially, it means that at the beginning your character has a problem and somehow through the middle they work through that problem and then it's resolved by the end. So the character arc is really cool because it's the whole message and theme behind your story, and instead of kind of preaching or shoving your message in your reader's face, you get to have your character learn something throughout the story, and oftentimes the reader will learn it too. For example, one message that's kind of the base of my character arc in a story I'm currently editing is that love is a choice rather than a feeling. So of course, at the beginning of the book, the main character believes that love is kind of a feeling, and if she doesn't have feelings towards someone, that means she doesn't really love them. But by the end, she realizes that regardless of how she feels, love is just a selfless choice, a sacrifice in action, and so she chooses to love rather than let her feelings guide who she loves. My second tip for characters is to make them likable, or if not likable, at least relatable. I know that in The King's Cursed Bride, a lot of times Carissa, the main character, isn't always likable and she does make some stupid decisions, but I also know that a few of my readers found her relatable even as she made those bad decisions. With that said, writing the certain parts of the story with her was really hard because it alienated a lot of readers from her, and though some readers found her relatable, a lot of readers didn't. So, long story short, if you can't make your character likable, at least make them relatable. Because no matter what a fab fabulous plot you have in store, if the reader doesn't care about the character, they don't care what happens to the character, or if the character dies or gets hurt or anything like that. So job number 1 is to make the reader care about the character. And then finally, don't manipulate the character. This is kind of related to a plot I made earlier with plot, but it's important enough to reiterate. Like, don't twist what your character would do and make them do something illogical just to get from plot point A to plot point B. Instead of manipulating the character, manipulate the circumstances around them. For example, in the beginning of the King's Chris ride, Carissa is in this healing tower, and I knew I couldn't have her stay in that tower because the readers would eventually get bored, so I had to have her get out and go somewhere or do something with Viltus. So I thought, okay, maybe she'll just kind of pack up her bags and leave, or maybe she wants to be an independent woman, then Viltus annoys her so she doesn't want to stay there. But given her circumstances, all of those choices are really illogical. I mean, she's a woman alone in this dangerous city, and she wants to leave this place of protection where she's cared for and has food. Like, that would not make sense. So instead, I brainstormed a few ideas. Like, I thought maybe the tower could catch on fire. I mean, that would definitely mean that she'd have to leave. But ultimately, I decided on a choice that not only caused her to leave the tower, but it also ramped up the suspense. And that was having the king, who she's really scared of, come into the town to visit those in the healing tower. And that is kind of the cataclysm that causes her to get out of that tower and then kind of to have this thing go on with Viltus. Anyway, I won't tell you too much about it because some of you might not have read the story. But in short, if you do need to get to a particular plot point so you don't bore the readers or so your story will come together like it's supposed to, manipulate the circumstances around the character rather than the character themselves. I hope you guys found something helpful in here, and if you have, I'd love to know about it in the comments below, and also let me know some of your favorite writing tips. And I'll see you next time. Bye!